And here's an army doctor named Yuasa Ken. This is not easy for me to speak about, but it is something I must confess. What I did was wrong. It is also true that it was forced on me by the government, but that does not reduce the size of my crime. It is something that happened a long time ago, but those who are not taught about the war are ill-educated. The Japanese army went to plunder and steal materials and to kill. Japan wanted iron, coal, and provisions, and the army drove into the mountains to prosecute the war. At the time, the Japanese used derogatory terms for the Chinese, like Chinaman and Chink, and looked at them with contempt. When I was a child, we were told to despise the Chinese, despise the Koreans. It's all right to conquer them. We have become elite and should join with the Americans and British and conquer Asia. I hated war and killing, but around middle school and into college, I began to think that such ideas were unavoidable. People were driven into a life in which human qualities were lost. The soldiers' outlet for frustrations was the brothel of the comfort women. Any means was resorted to in order to raise one's rank and keep up the authority of the country. And in the army hospital, we practiced vivisection. Living persons are good for the scalpel practice, so people were brought in. One day soon after I started at the assignment, the hospital head told us, "Today we will have surgery practice." I was startled. It was an order. There was no getting out of it. Normally, we dissected people who had died of such diseases as typhoid fever, dysentery, and tuberculosis. Now, we were being taken to the dissection room for a different type of exercise. Soldiers came along as observers. Everything started with a signal from the hospital head. One Chinese had big thighs and walked slowly and calmly. He laid down and had no sign of fear, no stress on his face. He was composed. Someone else used him for surgery practice. I went over and pushed the other one onto the operating table. I had no feeling of apology or of doing anything bad. The farmer was resigned to his fate, and he lowered his head and walked forward. I didn't want to get my clothes dirty from him. I wanted to look sharp. He went down as far as the operating table, but didn't want to lie down. A nurse, using broken Chinese, told him, "We're using ether. It won't hurt, so lie down." She gave me a wry smile when she said that. She had been working there for a long time, and when I happened to meet her again much later and asked her about it, she didn't remember. She was handling so many vivisections, it was routine. People who repeat evil acts do not remember them. There is no sense of wrongdoing. War means this also. War is not just shooting. In order for Japan to win, all the Chinese were made prisoners. Women's bellies were cut open. Homes were burned. If you couldn't do this, then you weren't a loyal soldier of the emperor. Even if one despises an act, one must bear it. From there, a person becomes accustomed to it. We all received practice. It was normal to smile at this. The crimes committed during our aggressive wars are forgotten, gone from memory. At the time, they were considered right. So the surgery began. The man was given ether and dissected. His appendix was so small that it was like looking for a burrowing worm. I had to cut and search repeatedly. The blood flow was stopped, nerves were cut, bones were cut with a saw, and a tracheotomy was performed. Blood and air escaped from his body. The blood came foaming up. Practice time was 2 hours. The man died, and his body was thrown into a hole and buried. That was my first crime. After that, it was easy. Eventually, I dissected 14 Chinese. I also saw vivisections. Once I saw about 40 doctors gathered. There was a man bound and squatting. The guard asked the doctors, "Are you ready?" And the prisoner was laid out without anesthetic. 2 cuts were made down his belly. The victim made a few gasps. The dissection was a botch, and he died soon. I saw 4 people dissected that way. It is said that there were 20 million victims of the war in China, but only 10 to 20% of these were killed in gunfire exchange. Most non-resisting old people, women, and children were captured and slaughtered. Prisoners of war could not be taken to the front or allowed to escape, so they were killed in the manner of the rape of Nanking. Those who were a part of it do not come forward to tell the people how it was. Why? Because the Japanese have forgotten all about it. Everybody's forgotten. They did things and got medals, and they don't think they did anything worse than kicking a dog. They weren't bothered because they never considered it a dreadful thing to take a scalpel and cut open a living person.